All right, so thank you guys for being willing to come to this session today. So I've titled this session Making Membership Meaningful. And the reason for that is, someone had actually brought up immediately following the keynote session, they asked me, DJ, why didn't you talk about the fact that a big part of leadership and recruiting and getting people to do something are the relationships? Because obviously that is something that you all, as marriage and family therapists, focus on day in and day out about how are you helping people strengthen those relationships. And I think as we go through this today, you're going to see that with membership, it is very similar in terms of creating that relationship. But what we're going to focus in on is we're often really good at creating relationships with people that are like us. How do we also learn how to foster those relationships for people that are not like us? So as we go through this today, I'm really going to want to focus on what creates this sense of connection between members and their association in order to build loyalty, engagement, positive feelings. And then also what we're going to look at is how can you leverage your personal story? And then also, if it's for someone that's not like you, how can you leverage other people's personal story to help create that really strong relationship? And then specifically relating to that last part about empathizing, with others, is that we're going to go through some exercises so you can learn how to empathize with members, not just those with similar needs as yours, but then also as you're looking at, kind of these different needs. So, I talked a little bit about my work with associations during the keynote, but also while I also manage conferences like these, I also have a huge focus around membership. So I've had to write a lot of membership campaigns and appeals, look at, different studies about what makes people at associations across the entire association industry want to join an organization and that also help them stay. And I'm going to try and help you guys engage in some exercises as well that hopefully you can take back and use with your chapters. So, all right, so this first exercise that we're going to do, which I like to call What's Your Story? So one thing you should know about me, you don't get to just kind of sit there and listen to me when we're doing these kinds of things. So for the first thing, I need everyone to stand up. So everyone stand up. Okay, so how long has CAMP been in existence?
53 years?
I think that's right, 53, 55 or 56. So we'll just say over 50 years, over 50 years. So one of the things that I always like to see in the room is the power of membership. So, all right, so if you have been a member of CAMP for less than 5 years, please sit down. Okay. If you have been a member of CAMP for 10 years or less, please sit down. Okay, if you have been a member of CAMP for 15 years or less, please sit down. Okay, and so let's give a round of applause for our longest term member. Mm-hmm. And if you don't mind, I'm sorry, we do have two, sorry. I did not mean Landon to avoid, so 15, all right, so as the contest keeps going. So, all right, if you've been a member of CAMP for 20 years or less, please sit down. All right, so let's give Lindon and so I'm always curious to hear, and just since we're recording this, if you don't mind, if you wouldn't mind sharing how long you have been a member of CAMP, and maybe what is either one thing or experience that has kept you a member for all those years, of however many years that you've been a member, which you're going to tell us first.
Okay. So I've been a member for 22 years. I started in 97 when I was in graduate school at Chapman University. And one experience, I guess, was the yearly conference that we have. That was my one way that I was involved with CAMP for the first probably 15 years. And so I would just go and it was just an opportunity to collaborate and be with other people. I've never taken one online CEU because I love being in the rooms with people. So that was the big draw. And now I'm a whole nother level since I've moved to the Central Coast, and now I'm on the board, now I'm the president, and I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm going to learn.
Yes, that is great. Let's give her a round of applause. Thank you. All right, and also, and I really, really appreciate the fact that you are the longest term member, so I've got a special prize for you. I wanted to make sure that also people would understand what this is. This is called Chill with Bob Ross. So if we have any millennials in the room, you might, Bob Ross with his just great, totally chill afro, so it's I hope that you enjoy, and so thank you, and we thank you, for your membership. All right, so I want to also ask that the same question of, so is there anyone who's been a member for say 2 years or less? 2 years or less. Okay, so I'm going to jump, since I was on this side, I'm going to jump over to Matt, and then I'm going to come back, to you. And Matt, if you don't mind sharing, what is it that made you join camp to begin with? And so it's been 2 years. So what is it that has kept you coming back?
What initially made me join camp is I realized there is a really big disconnect from when you leave grad school and when you're in grad school, the amount of support you get. And in grad school, you have all your teachers and everybody who's there to support you. But then once you leave, there was less of that support. And one of the main things why I kept coming to LA Camp is because it's really big on community and having that own support group that you can go to have people that can relate to what your experience is like. And why I became involved is because during my time becoming licensed, I met with a lot of people and they gave me a lot of really great advice and guidance along the way. So I wanted to be in a position where I could then give back to the next group coming along.
All right, thanks for that, Matt. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you. And all right, so, and being a member for less than 2 years, is your experience similar or is it different?
Actually, it is quite similar. I've been a member about a year and a half, and I got into it because I was being trained by LCSWs. Nearly every single one of my supervisors was an LCSW, and I felt constantly like I wasn't getting enough training, like I was incompetent every time I turned around. And so when I came into camp, I knew about the group. I'd been part of it in initial phase when I was in grad school, but came back and I knew I could get the support. I knew I could get more training when I felt I needed it. So that's what's been beneficial.
All right, that's great. Thank you. Thank you. Let's give him a round of applause too. Thank you, Michael, for sharing. And so, hearing, those experiences about, really finding in some ways finding your community, and getting, in some cases, both the validation, but also sometimes getting the depth of knowledge that you weren't getting from other mental health professionals that don't have a similar focus. But then also, kind of like finding that both sense of community and giving back, but also, Matt, you sharing that you were recently licensed, and hopefully, your interactions kind of helped a little bit. I mean, obviously, you had to sit in that room for all the hours and hours and hours and pass the exam that you did, but finding a way to leverage other people's stories in your meetings, because I know that it's really easy and it's expected to a certain extent that if there's some kind of meeting and they know that you're on the board or that you're serving membership in some ways, when you stand up, they're going to say, oh, of course DJ is going to talk about membership. That's the job of why he's here. But finding some way to visually show, both that there are new people, there are people that have, been with the organization for a while and keep coming back, and showing those powerful messages can really help, kind of illustrate the value that camp brings. So I want to give you guys a chance to also share your stories with each other. So I'm going to give you guys just 3 minutes to, if you can, try and, it looks like everyone will be able to pair up at their table. or even if you want to talk as a table that you can, but I'm only going to give you about 3.5 minutes to talk about this, and I'm setting the timer, so I am going to cut you off. So it's just, how long have you been a member? Why did you join initially? And maybe what keeps you bringing back? All right, so it sounds like people are having a lot of great conversations, but I'm going to just start trying to bring people's attention back here. I know we'll switch it up a little bit. So if you can hear me snap once, if you can hear me snap twice. All right, when you're a jet. Anyway, so I will not horrify you with my musical styling. So I heard lots of, kind of great conversations going on. So when people were sharing their initial stories, We heard some things related to both connection, and once again, my handwriting, I apologize in advance. We heard some things, in some cases, connection also related to both validation in some ways. And I'm talking about more professional and emotional validation in some ways. And then also in terms of people finding things related to their, kind of career path. So now I'm curious to hear what are some of the things that either you shared or you heard, your partner that you were talking with sharing about. What were some of the other things that related to valuable experiences related to membership? All right, so we'll start in the back and then we'll move over.
So she and I both have business experience from the past, and like when we got into starting to help, we could use that business experience to actually then give back to the things that we were liking, like the connection and being part of something. Like then we could give back to it too. So not only connect with, but then say, hey, we have something valuable here.
Sure. So you're helping to add things to both the profession, the industry, if you will, as well as the larger organization beyond that. And then also, I think what you pointed out is so key that we think about people going into, different careers that we're thinking that maybe it's their first career, when really they could be second or third or fourth or even fifth careers. Like, I'm just curious, how many people here being in LMFT is your first career? All right, so we've got 3 people out of the entire room. And that's where it's really important when you're talking about both like the career side, or like when you're doing appeals to, especially to recent graduates or students, don't start it out with, hey kids, as you're growing up, recognizing that there are many different pathways that people take in order to get here. But I thought that and also, kind of people want to add, to the profession. All right, what else? What other kinds of things were people sharing or talking about? All right, over there in the back.
Getting CEUs or providing CEUs to the members.
Sure. Yep, CEUs and especially for people keeping up their licensure, that is going to be something that's really key. Anything else? All right, well, we are going to identify more things as we end up kind of going through. So, and it's funny, in the last session that I did of this particular session, I actually had Jan, the president, in the room. I had warned her in advance that I was going to put her letter up. So, as I mentioned, as a membership professional working at associations, I've had to write this letter a lot of times for leaders. And I typically call this is the laundry list. We have taken every single benefit and we put it up there. And I understand that as chapter leaders, you've got this kind of dual role or responsibility when it comes to membership. Like, on one hand, you may talk to someone who doesn't know anything about CAMFT. And so you are trying to recruit them as members to the larger organization so that then they can belong to your chapter. But then you're also having to sell the value of your chapter, both to people that were already members and haven't seen the value of joining your chapter, or for that person that doesn't know anything about the organization that might be saying, okay, well, so explain to me, I'm gonna pay dues to join, and then now I need to pay additionally to join you. What is that value? So I always see this list a lot. What I call this approach is the spray and pray approach. You are spraying it all up there and you're just hoping that whoever walks into it, it's okay, there's something on there that appeals to you and that you're going to identify with it. But so do you think that this appeal or approach works a lot if you're having a one-on-one kind of interaction, or if you're talking to a smaller group of people? And no, because we all know when we've got a form letter, right? Because what we basically do is the first thing that we read that doesn't apply to us, we think, oh, this wasn't written for me. This was, written for, or they don't know me, or sometimes even worse, they might say, okay, so they don't have any value for me because they're not able to speak, kind of directly to me. So another study that an organization that I used to work for, the American Society of Association Executives, did was called the Decision to Join. So this study was specifically about why people choose to or not to join an organization. And one of the things that they found out is while the spray and pray approach or laundry list, that sometimes gets people to stop to take a second look, especially if there's something on there when they're like, oh, okay, I see some things on there about insurance, or I see some things on there about legal advice. I could use that. Let me look a little bit more kind of into that. When it comes to especially renewing, that initial kind of reason is not what's going to make someone stay. That's not someone who's been a member for over 20 years is going to say, okay, well, those legal protections that I was paying for in the beginning, that's why I've been signing up for 20 years. It's not to say that for some people that might be the reason, but that's more rare for someone that's going to stay. So another organization that I worked with, which did a study specifically about member loyalty. So the focus was on what makes people stay. And also sometimes if you are doing the laundry list, sometimes it's good to put things into categories. So instead of just listing all the benefits, one person in the last session had a really great suggestion about you can divide it by career stage. Like, here are the benefits that maybe are most appealing to you when you are an associate or as you're working towards getting licensure, or here are the benefits that might be more appropriate to you based on your practice setting, which we're going to get into a little bit later. But so in these percentages that I'm putting up, I want to point out, this isn't just particular to CAMF. This is a lot of associations. But in general, they typically apply across and hopefully are applicable even to your members. So top benefits that people really rated, especially for professional societies, I should say. So professional societies are where you're joining as an individual, not your company. So this would be really different if, like, for the National Association of Hospitals, that's the value proposition is different because it is a company that's joining. It's not an individual. But for professional societies where it supports a specific profession or industry, the things that people rate, which is very similar, is having ethical standards, getting information about what other people are doing across the profession that are making them successful that they can tie into. And then also, in some cases, especially where you've got a lot of sole practitioners, we want to know that someone is out there protecting our interest and representing us. A lot of the things that your executive director and leadership were talking about in the sessions this morning, these are the kinds of things that really, kind of appeal. And I often get the question sometimes, well, doesn't that change based on the generations of the people? And this actually came up in the last session. Someone said, for someone that's graduating and is just starting out as an associate as compared to someone that maybe is closer to retirement, don't these values change? But the answer is that if we start over here with the millennials, and then once again, this was not my study. I did not call them matures, but that's what they were called in the study. But whether you're a millennial or whether a mature, you'll notice that like the top 4 or 5 things are basically still the same in terms of whether it's standards. Millennials, they want to fuel growth. They want to know that they can have a job and that they can go somewhere in their career, but also representing interests. But then jumping over, to the other side, there's still the knowing that there's ethical standards, advocacy, where it's more about, I want to protect the accomplishments that I have seen happen during the time that I've been in the profession. And I still want to know what other people are doing. So the same values are there. It's just in terms of the orders of importance. So, but I just bring that up to kind of show about how a lot of these things in terms of what pulls people into professional societies, whether that is therapy or nursing or education, they are still very similar. Now, but one of the more troubling things, I guess, or one of the more challenges related to this study is that while a lot of people said they were very satisfied with their organization, so that they most likely were going to join, if you see over half of them said, I don't really feel connected. I don't really understand, maybe more than what I'm getting. I don't feel like I am a part of this. I don't feel like I belong. And you'll notice one of the campaigns that I'm going to show a little bit later, a lot of associations have started using the word belong in their membership campaigns because it's got a great kind of two-way application. Because on one hand, we want you to belong. We want you to feel like there is a place for you here. But also at the same time, this is an organization that belongs to you, that does the things that you need, and that also, if you engage with it, you can help shape the direction of where it's going. It's not just a one-way thing. It's like the old, kind of like propaganda films, like after I think World War II, about just don't just ask what America can do for you. Ask what you can do for America. It's like, but making sure that you've got both sides of that as you're kind of thinking about that. So, and what this really relates to is like when it comes to member engagement, volunteer recruitment engagement, all those kinds of things. And I'll read it. It really relates to engagement comes from exceeding expectations, which means being relevant and providing value. So, and the reason why, I bolded the words in white there specifically is because expectations are related to what does this mean for me? And what does this mean for my life? And then that is what ends up providing value. So, and really the way that someone, in last session, because I'm always good about recognizing, a good idea that someone else has, you guys have to do assessments all the time. That's basically like a big part of what you guys are doing as therapists. You have to look and say, where is someone now? What do they need? How do I connect them to the behaviors or things that are going to help them get there? So membership is almost exactly the same. I think just what the trouble and the challenge is, as I mentioned, is we're really good sometimes about thinking what we need. It's more difficult as we're thinking about what others need.
Can you go back to the...
Oh, yes, sure. This one, yes. And I did send all of these slides to staff, and so they do have it. They should be making it available to you. Also, if anyone wants to take my card after this, I'm happy to send it. I can send it today if you send me an email if you have something that's coming up. All right, did everyone get it? Okay, great.
Thank you.
Sure. And then also, I think it is important to remember that while you are part of a larger whole, it's important that for someone that doesn't know anything about the organization and that is new, it is important that you understand all sides of the organization, because you never know where they're going to be getting value from. Like maybe you have a lot of sole practitioners in your organization, in your chapter, and so you don't have a lot of benefits for someone in like a hospital setting, but there are some benefits that you know of that the larger organization has. So knowing when to pivot and when to say, oh, well, yes, here's what you get from the chapter, but also remember that you're getting this from the larger organization. That's going to help you communicate, the full value. All right, so I've been talking a lot. So now I'm going to give you guys an assignment. So we're going to do what is basically called a persona exercise. So everyone should have in front of them just one of these exercise sheets. So I want you to fill out the entire sheet. I'm only going to give you about 3 minutes to do it. So step 1 through step 4. And I want you to fill it out. Fill it out on behalf of yourself. So it should be fairly easy. You should be able to check where you are in your career stage, career path. I worked with the staff to put the options on here. If I missed your particular situation, just feel free to write it in. If you can write in if there's something different about your career path or practice area. But you want to put in your demographics. You also, when you get to step 2, you want to think about what are your major projects. It might be who are your major clients, what are areas of interest, what makes you unique, whatever you think that's important for like the success of you. Then as you go to step 3, it's thinking about, so like out of all of those categories that the benefits fall into, if it's education, professional development, marketing yourself, career advancement, whatever it might be, or writing in, whatever the other thing is of the larger category of the types of things that bring value to you, check that. And then Then you're going to think about, so I've listed all of the member benefits, at least that I know of. They're on the back, and then try and check which ones you think bring the most value to you, that are the most relevant to you. Well, and and this is, I've had to adapt this for multiple organizations. So you could also put like, if there's a niche area in terms of either like clients that maybe or a specialty that you're focusing in on. And this is where I kind of end up out of my element. So if it's like imago or whatever it might be, something.
You mean like as a practitioner?
Yeah, as a practitioner. Yes, as a practitioner. Yes. And if it's non-applicable to you, then just skip it. All right, so we are at time, and so I'm really curious to hear what were some of the things that kind of maybe came out of this, and then specifically, what I'm really going to focus in on maybe some of the demographics, but I'm always more interested in steps 2 and steps 4. So, what are some of the things that, as you kind of thought about, were either major areas of interest or what kind of made you unique? And then based off of that, how did you map that to which specific benefits? All right, so who's willing to volunteer and share first? Okay, all right, thank you.
So should I just read my answers to
Sure.
step 2?
Yeah, that would be good.
So my major projects are clinical work with families, kids, teens, millennials, and parents. That's my true love. And also networking. I actually love doing that too. These two kind of go together, I guess. My areas of interest is somatic and spiritual psychotherapy and family therapy. And what makes me unique is I've been a therapist for over 25 years. I've been doing this since high school, practically my whole life. But I've been licensed over 35 years, and I combine somatic psychotherapy with spiritual approaches, and I'm also really a direct person. I see it, call it like I see it, and I work pretty fast.
Okay, so now, and that is probably one of the most like diverse and varied kind of practice areas and niches that I've heard since we've been doing that. So then, what did you, as you had to go to the back and think about which benefits specifically, what did you decide? What did you map to?
So I mapped to all the ones under networking.
Okay.
Because I run the networking event for our chapter LA. The legal call center, malpractice, and student liability insurance.
Okay.
Advocacy and affinity discount programs, and professional advice.
Okay, and I could see how appealing and valuable that would be, especially being in more of a setting where you are working mostly for yourself.
I'm working
Yes.
100% now for myself for many years.
All right, so do you want Starbucks or movie gift certificate?
I'll take movie.
All right, there you go. So thank you. Let's give a round of applause for yes. So see, it pays to go first. It pays to go first. All right, so who else wants to maybe share what? All right, thank you.
Mid-career, career path practitioner, area, private practice, firm size to the 10. And my major project is building a group practice and expanding a new chapter of CAN. Areas of interest, working with couples, people in the industry, and tools for dismantling anxiety. And what makes me unique is a leader and straight shooter. Believe that the sum total is as important and is equal to the individual parts. And then under number 3, marketing, networking, or community and volunteering. And mapping to appropriate opportunities, engagement with chapter, e-newsletters, advocacy, and marketing support.
All right, thank you. Let's give her a round of applause. So, and it was interesting to me that you also have, it sounds like as a part of your job, that kind of business development part in terms of growing the
Yeah.
practice, as well as probably, so you're not in a supervisor role yet,
I
but
am.
you are, okay.
Yeah.
And so you are, right. So you're both growing the staff in terms of their abilities and so on, but then you're also trying to grow the practice as well.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Sure, okay.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
see one leads to the other. You
Yeah.
need one in order to be able to do the
Yes.
other. And so that's an interesting in terms of both a story and thinking about kind of the relevancy, because I'll bet you that there are a number of other people out there that maybe are so focused on that development part, but they're not tying into CAMFT. So what is it about, kind of your experience and what brought you in that could appeal to others and also help your chapter as you're trying to grow and develop your chapter as well, to bring other people in, kind of like that too. So do we have one more maybe who's willing to share? Okay. Are you both, so we've had a sole practitioner, someone that is kind of growing their business. Do either of you fall into that category just in terms of trying to, so no and no? Part of a group practice? Okay. Let's, okay, you know what? I think we have enough time, so we'll go with both. So why don't we go with you first, and then we'll share so that everyone gets a chance to share.
Registered associate, practitioner in an agency of 51 to 100 people.
Okay. All right. That's the largest group so far here.
My personal major projects are creating change in behavior issues.
Okay.
My areas of interest are sanctuary and play therapy, gender specialization, borderline personality disorder, sex offender therapy, mindfulness, and training in leading others.
Okay.
I'm eclectic in my therapeutic style. I'm focused about change, and I am a servant leader.
Okay.
As far as mapping, I want to engage with the chapters. I really appreciate the EBSCO host. That is such a vital need.
Mm-hmm.
Advocacy, certified supervisor program, code of ethics, continuing ed, mentor-mentee, opportunities, and professional advice.
All right. Let's give Michael a round of applause. Thank you for that. And it might be interesting, for a number of you who are in private practice, because I know this came up in the last session where someone was trying to, in an exercise that we're going to get to later, trying to think about what are the important needs of someone that is working in an environment where there might be like 100 or close to that more therapists, and what is that? And so hearing this and the kinds of things that some of the same kinds of things that you mentioned around both like engagement, but then also how can you connect with people, whether it's in a virtual way or so on, and why that might be more valuable, to you, in kind of getting an understanding for that, even if that's not your setting, so that now if you meet someone, you know how to pivot and what kinds of either benefits or values to talk about first. Because remember, you don't want to do the laundry list. As you're talking to someone, you want to try to figure out what are those maybe 2 or 3 things, or maybe that one big thing. And you try and lead with that, because if you can get that one hook to kind of pull them in, then connecting them to Michael or someone similar, even if they're not like you, that's going to help them, kind of get the value. All right, so we have, and just one more, because I didn't want to leave you out.
I'm recently dual licensed, meaning I'm licensed as an MFT about 2 years, and I just passed my PCC exam.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. So I practice in a private practice right now, who has 2 different locations. So in total, I think we have about less than 20 clinicians right now.
Sure.
We are there 7 days a week. Major projects is cultural transitions, because I'm not originally from the States, so I'm trying to help other people that are not from the States or from California to help them.
Yes, acclimate.
And immigration evaluations. Areas of interest, trauma, different cultures, networking, mindfulness. I think unique in me is a lot of people tell me that I'm very calm and very relaxing. So other people like that apparently. And I'm good at finding resources for people. So finding places where they can go, I can help.
So then what did you end up mapping to in terms of the benefits of CAMFT that really, bring value that are relevant to you?
All the networking. Legal call center is always handy. Malpractice, EBSCO, advocacy. Apparently, my agency or my private practice wants me to do the supervisor program next, so
Oh, okay.
that would be interesting.
Sure.
The code of ethics and the continuing education.
All right. All right. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So, it's interesting that across all of those different kind of practice settings and experiences, there were like networking was something that definitely rose to the top, but you'll hear that the reasons why people were going to the networking might be very different. And learning how to kind of listen and kind of how to craft that kind of response when you're thinking about that is really important, because then it shows you're listening and that you see the person, that you are validating them and not just saying, okay, I'm going into my regular speech about this is what it is, but really getting to their why. So, so now for the next one, because you'll notice you have 2 sheets of paper. So this is the one that is not going to be as easy and that might feel a little uncomfortable. Okay, so yes, and I'll bring you, so it's the same sheet of paper, but what you're going to need to do is I'm asking you to do the opposite. So now I want you to engage in a little bit of creative thinking and to think about, so if you are in private practice now, what if you were talking to someone like, some of the things that you've heard shared about someone who's not a sole practitioner, who's trying to grow the business, or who works at an agency that's close to 100 people. So fill out the demographics. That should be easy, because you just want to think about someone that is opposite than you, different in where they're in their career, different in their practice setting. But then you're going to have to fill out the rest of the stuff too. And think about what would potentially make this person unique, what would their needs be, and then at the end, once you get to the end of it, you're going to need to map it back to, like the benefits that would be most valuable and appealing to them. So I'm going to give you, I think, a full maybe 3 minutes to think about that, because I realize this is going to take a little bit more synthesis in order to figure that out, and then I'll be interested to see what you guys come up with. So I'll check back in with you guys in 3 minutes. All right. So I see a lot of people still kind of thinking and writing. But one of the questions I always like to ask people is, how did that feel? Maybe, a little uncomfortable. And I know that, someone was explaining to me in the last session, as therapists, you guys are used to assessing, but you're also used to having things that you know that you can map it to. And I realize in this exercise, one of the difficulties is that, just based on, kind of like your own experience, what the benefits are. You kind of have some understanding of maybe what the setting is that someone's in and a little bit of what their needs are, but you don't have as that strong a connection. So I realize there's a little bit more anxiety there when it kind of comes to that. And this is also some of the similar things that your other leaders and volunteers that you're probably trying to lead in membership efforts are going through too as well, where you'll often see if they're talking to someone and maybe that person walks in and they're trying to engage them, and then they find out that they're from a hospital setting, and then they just kind of, your volunteer now either freezes or just kind of glosses over. Actually, as someone was doing that exercise in the last session that I did, I actually heard her say, as she was looking through it, she said, "My chapter has nothing to offer for them." And realizing that CAMP it's a big tent organization. You guys are saying that regardless of what practice area someone is in, there is something. It's just sometimes it's going to be a little bit more difficult to figure out what to tie them to. So I'm curious, who's willing to kind of to be brave and share? Okay, great. And I will give you your card in advance because it pays to go first. So tell us a little bit about what you chose as the persona and what you kind of tried to map out and think about related to that.
So I did a student wanting to go into practitioner, not sure where they're going to practice in what area because they're new.
Sure. Okay.
So I put as what the person's major project is learning. They want to pass the test.
Mm-hmm.
They want to start their practicum. Area of interest. I think that type of person, they're not sure what their area of interest because they just started. So they don't know if they want to go into drug rehab or exactly where they're wanting to go. So they might be wanting to find out more information from everybody to find out where their niche is. And then I put what makes that person unique. One, fresh ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And they might come with thinking out of the box, where we might be a little bit more in that little box. So they come out with and very eager too.
Sure, yes.
Very eager. And then the nice thing about students would be, they want that professional development, resource, publication, networking would be a big one. Advocacy, they want that discount because, they're looking at the student loans. Mm-hmm. Wanting just more information, like going to conferences. And I think they might be eagerly to volunteer because that's a good way to network.
Sure.
And looks good on a resume. And, really wanting, because I know a lot of schools are really looking at and when you're doing your practicum, that they want you to have that malpractice insurance. Mm-hmm. And if you belong to the organization, you get that free. So They're really looking at that. Scholarships and grants. Big one is jobs. As co-host would be the magazine because they want to make sure this licensing that they're getting, they don't get in trouble and lose their license. So they're going to want to read the back of that magazine. Advocacy, I could see they want to know about the code of ethics, continuing their education. I don't think a lot of people know about the vision and dental insurance that they might be able to get. Marketing support because they don't know how to market themselves, so they would want more of that. And then just being a part of an organization. Because when you're in school, it's way different than when you're, in your practice. And so just trying to understand from school what they say in the books to real life. And professional advice. They want that guidance.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Diana. Let's give her a round of applause. Thank you. So, and I saw, you ended up checking almost all the boxes.
Yeah.
So right. So the difficult thing would be, kind of trying to choose in some cases out of all of those, which ones have the most priority to them right now. But you're right. But I think it can be a very strong message of also explaining, look at how this can help you get to where you want to go now. But then even beyond that, after you've finished your practicum, after you've gotten licensed, there's still all these things too. Like I think sometimes I've seen in a number of associations where people will think, oh, I only need to join if I go into private practice because it seems like everyone's in private practice. Or once I've passed and I've gotten licensed, I don't really need you anymore. And so figuring out a way to kind of explain to people, oh, look, no, there's value at every stage. There's value in every situation. So even if someone is going into eventually a hospital or an agency setting, because I don't know if it's similar here, but for other organizations that I've worked at where there are a lot of sole practitioners, I found that they would lose people if they went to a more larger kind of firm or practice environment, because then people felt like, oh, I'm not going to be getting any of those kinds of resources. So anyone else want to share what okay, so we've got, and then I'll come back to you, Matt.
I kind of created an amalgamated persona
Sure,
of
okay.
somebody that maybe is in an institutional setting as well as in kind of a larger sort of military agency. Because I'm from Ventura County. So
Right, yes.
military there as well. So the person that I picked, the person I created, is mid-career practitioner that works in sort of an agency or institutional setting with 100+ people. And I said the major projects that this person deals with is coming up with best practices for their team or group, grant writing, areas of interest, training and supervising newly licensed folks or people that are new to the practitioner setting, and knowledge sharing. And then what makes the person unique is maybe their experience in military or law enforcement, and working with a diverse group of diverse population and diverse issues like domestic violence and all of that other stuff, and experience working in a hierarchy. But under other, I said, okay, well, what challenges would this person be experiencing? The institutional setting can sometimes impact the person's ability to connect and remain empathetic, or dealing with skepticism, or having compassion, or a low tolerance for bureaucracy. So I've heard, because I've been like membership chair for a long time, I've heard people say like, oh, I don't have time for networking, I don't have time for that, I don't have any more energy for that. And so I imagine that they would really kind of only ask for resources, or think that might be their needs. But then, the thing that I would map to them is kind of facilitating more engagement with the chapters and say, well, I understand that you might not feel like you want that networking opportunity, but it would be a really good place for you to be able to go and, connect with other people and share your experience, blah, blah, blah. Scholarships and grants, the legal call center is always a big one. And advocacy, and the certification program for supervisors. So everything obviously is like beneficial for everyone, but finding like the things that would be key for those people.
No, that's really great. Thank you for sharing. That was great. Yeah. And I think that was you may also do you have writing experience? Have you been a writer before? Creative marketer. Okay. So yeah, so you were good at creating, because that was definitely a fully realized persona. And I think that, and thinking about the fact that someone being in a large agency environment that's supervising for the first time, that gives you an immediate tie in terms of something that you can kind of key into. So, engaging in these kinds of exercises, as you're kind of thinking about either working with volunteers about what are the kinds of things that they can say at meetings, or especially like if you send out communications, especially if you are ever having to do follow-ups, like, someone came into our, networking, kind of social connecting hour, and they were from an environment where there was no one that was like them that was there. So now I'm trying to think about who can I reach out to that I can connect them to after to say, look, I know that we didn't have anyone we're so glad that you came, and we know there wasn't anyone there from, like a large agency. Let me connect you to Michael or whoever it might be, so that you can hear a little bit about what their experience is. Or if you're sending them a message, if you don't have that person, where you're trying to say, oh, and here are just like 2 benefits that I don't know if you know a lot about, but we've got a program for first-time supervisors And I'd love to connect you to more information by that. It just helps you craft a stronger message that really helps someone see like, oh, you actually see me. You are actually speaking to me. You're not just giving me some kind of canned pitch that you didn't adjust to my needs and who I am. So we did a campaign at one of the organizations that I worked at, and it was basically called You Belong Here. And it was a series of member profiles. I don't, if you have a newsletter or if you send out communications, it's really easy to, have like that member of the month or member spotlight or wherever it is, where you do exactly the same thing. You're allowing people to kind of tell their personal story, where hopefully you're using their own words, their pictures. I know some organizations, chapters will use that for their new members. So their new members are getting some visibility. I actually think it's important to think about diversity. So it's good to have someone that's been less than 2 years, for someone who's been there for 20 years, for someone that's because what happens is like, say you're only putting the new people in, and it turns out that they're all very similar to each other. They all look the same. They're all in the same practice environment. They all, have been with the organization for the same amount of time. Then it starts to give the impression or to create a culture that everything is the same. So being a little strategic about it and trying to think like now, as you kind of create these personas, both who you have and who you're looking to get, and trying to be more strategic about it to say, okay, look, before we do this event that's going to focus on our new supervisor, like on the benefits of the new supervisor program, why don't we try in the message to do something that spotlights someone from a large agency environment or whatever it might be. So, but now, and this gets into, so as you're writing those stories, or if you're thinking about what that story would be to bring people in, as therapists, I know you guys are used to connecting the emotional and the intellectual all the time. That's one of the reasons why I was so excited to be able to come and speak to you guys this weekend, because I was like, okay, you guys get the head and the heart. You know how to do that. So I want to engage you guys in like a storytelling exercise, and we're shifting back to, you're thinking about yourself again. So you're not going to have to think about a different person. But so like in storytelling, and once again, what I'm going to describe, it sounds easy, or it sounds simple, but that doesn't mean that it's easy. And I have a journalism degree. I actually used to write for magazine. So that's my background, my experience before I got into my second career. So when you're writing a story, and so I want you to go back and you can look at your responses from the first sheet when you were writing about yourself, is when you're thinking about an experience, first I want you to think about when whatever you put as like the number one benefit or value that spoke to you, whether it was networking, the conference, connecting, I want you to think about one specific experience. So try to think about like a conference, maybe it was the first conference that meant a lot to you, or it might be a conference where you met some connection, a mentor, a colleague that now has been, connected to you for like the rest of the time that you've been a member of the organization. But think about something specific that had an impact on you. Then you want to kind of simplify it and keep it short. So it might be, this was the first meeting that I was going to, this was the first meeting where I really felt like I belonged to the CAMP community. And then you want to include the emotions that you felt. Maybe it was anxiety about taking on new responsibilities at the job. Maybe it was excitement about finally passing the licensure exam and what that was going to mean for what you could do if you figured out the next steps in your career. And then to think about how did that kind of solve your issue. How did it help you reach your goal of whatever you were trying to reach? So just kind of think about that. So try to write just like a story that's related to that. And then, and so I want you guys to kind of picture that in your mind, what it might be, one specific experience that you've had with camp. It could be coming to this conference. It could be hearing me speak to you today. No, I'm kidding. So, and then some additional guidance that I'll give. So for storytelling basics, there's always a beginning, a middle, and an end. basically, this is very similar to the last slide that I showed. I'm just reformatting it in a different way. I'm saying that, so now as you start out and you're kind of thinking of your story, it's like you're now kind of starting out with that issue you were facing. I was looking to pass the exam, or I had just graduated, or I was at a difficult kind of changing moment in my career. And so that's the beginning of your story. And then the middle is, what is that emotion that ties the whole thing together? Excitement, anxiety, all the things that you're used to talking to your clients about. What is that, kind of driving emotion? And then the end, which should be, fairly obvious, is just okay. And so then with your experiences through CAMFT, how did you kind of experience that or resolve whatever it was, reach the goal that you were trying to get to in a way that if you were just by yourself, if you had not had that relationship and that connection to CAMFT, how would that, it wouldn't have happened. So that gives you the beginning, the middle, and the end. All right, so I know people have been, and that storytelling is hard. It's not, a lot of people think that it's easy to be a writer or to be a journalist. I think that's one of the reasons why I left. I actually, for a while, was getting headaches because you have to sit there and there's all that synthesis. Although I'm sure you guys have to do similar things sometimes when you're coming up with assessments and plans. Hopefully it doesn't give you headaches or you wouldn't be here. All right, so I want to, who is willing to share, and this can be more folksy, it can be more ad hoc. You don't have to necessarily read exactly what you wrote, but thinking about those things, who's willing to share their experience? Okay, well, I'm gonna, since you had your hand up first, Michael, and I'll give you the last. So go ahead and share, share your story, and if either of these slides are helpful, I'll leave the storytelling basics slide up.
So a little over a year ago, I was feeling very secluded. I was working in sex offender treatment, and not many people can handle that. They don't want to hear these stories. And I went to my first leadership conference last year. And the encouragement that I found, the positivity, everyone saying, I'm so glad someone's doing something. It was amazing. It actually made me feel like I was actually included in the community and that I mattered in what I did.
All right, thank you. That was perfect. Thank you. Yes, round of applause for that. That was because you had the issue, the emotion, and then the resolution, and also by relating it specifically to a program, it's well, if therapy doesn't work out and you ever want a job in like membership and helping people write membership things, you might have, some real talent there. So thank you. Thank you. All right, so Beth.
So I moved to the Bay Area a couple of years ago, and I transferred jobs from the agency I worked at in LA to the same agency's site in San Leandro, which is by Oakland. And I just took whatever position they had available for me at the time. And while it was a great experience, and I've had some new roles that I hadn't had before, I just really wasn't feeling very challenged. I wasn't feeling stimulated. I didn't really feel like there was a road or opportunity for me to move up within that agency. So I joined CAMFT because I felt like I needed to learn more about what opportunities there were in the Bay Area and meet other therapists because I only knew the other people I was working with. So I started really being able to see what other things I could do. And then I was recruited to be on the board. And now I have challenges. And I am feeling stimulated and inspired and thinking about what I can contribute to our chapter. And I'm also feeling more confident about making a change or transition in my career.
That is great. Thank you. Warm round of applause for Beth. That was wonderful. That was wonderful. So hopefully that also shows storytelling, you can do it. And I also think that like doing these same kinds of things with others to get them to understand how to, because there's so many people who when they think membership recruitment, sales, all that kind of stuff that like they just throw up the laundry list, they spray and pray, and they're not really either sharing their own experience in a way that's going to connect and create that relationship. I would imagine that, both of the experiences that Michael and Beth shared are similar to things that others have felt too. Even if it's not in the specific area that, Michael, that you were focusing in, I'm sure that there are other people who are in areas that are challenging and that are areas that they're not going to necessarily talk about in casual dinner conversation with people that are not therapists. And then I'm sure that there are other people who they're kind of fine in their job, but they're feeling really unfulfilled. And so suddenly having that emotion that then also ties into an actual benefit, it's just a different way to connect. And these are the kinds of things that I know someone, came up to me after the end of the last session, they were like, DJ, just say assessment. And also, that this is what we do day in and day out. And I said, I know this is what you do, but it's funny how often when we volunteer, sometimes we take off the skills that we have, as a part of our jobs because we're like, oh, this is different. And we don't realize that we can incorporate some of these great things that we might have from past jobs, past lives, and pull that in to being, kind of more successful. So, to kind of wrap this up in terms of, what can you do now as you go back to your chapters and you're trying to help lead and develop leaders to do this, kind of within your chapter? The first thing is whether it's, and I did give this worksheet to the staff, they have a digital version. So if it's helpful to do a similar exercise, or even if you're okay, we're going to create some member profiles that we're going to put out there. Let's make sure that we've got representation across practice areas. And I was just talking about practice area. If we were going to talk about diversity and inclusion, there's other elements about diversity. People that are, international, or even visual diversity related to race, ethnicity, ability level, all the other things. There are all these things that you can map onto it. But, identifying different personas, and then also if you find some good stories, learning them yourself, and then helping other people in your chapter learn them too. So that way, when they run into someone that's not like them, they don't freeze, or they don't have the response that's kind of oh, well, I don't know if we have anything for you. Because chances are, the organization does. It might not be the things that you need, but you want to connect them to what they need. And so the other large question is, so when can you incorporate this kind of storytelling? Is it having everyone stand up and sit down and then having them share their story like that before? Is it putting something in a communication, but just finding ways that you can incorporate that in, and then helping others understand how they can pivot when someone is not, kind of like them? And so, in relating to these key takeaways, which I think they're going to put up on a slide at the end of the sessions, but really it's that you want to create that sense of connection, and you want things to be relevant to the people that you're talking to. And that a good part of a good story is that it is both emotional and intellectual. It's not just all of one. You need to have both in order for them to remember it and for it to be valid. And this is why it's important for you to know the benefits. You have to know, those are the building blocks that you're going to use and then tie to someone's experience to build this kind of more kind of holistic experience to kind of selling membership. So, and this is one of the last things that had come out of that study, which is it's interesting that you'll notice now how, in a lot of advertising, commercials and stuff that you'll see, before it used to be about do this and you'll save money, or do this and it's going to help you be more happier. And now, especially in this YouTube, Instagram age, you see that it's a lot more experiences about FOMO, fear of missing out, showing people doing these things where it's not I'm not talking about the benefits, I'm trying to show that you're missing out on this greater experience. And so that's why, this study was saying that, it's traditional value propositions were about what you can expect to get, whereas now people are more focused on what is the experience that they will have to be a part of this. And I want to say this in terms of the disclaimer, in terms of value propositions and return on investment, there are some people who their brains are still wired that way. right? Like they are like, okay, membership is $200. Tell me what that means, you know, like, and so it's like, okay, well, you would have paid this much in insurance and you would have paid this much in, but I promise you, like, while that may get them to stop and say, tell me a little bit more, after you do that, try and switch to the experience. You have to figure out sometimes how to get through those initial kind of guardrails. But the thing that they're going to remember, yeah, and that's going to create the connection exactly, is that you're going to create that experience. So I hope you guys have found this session really helpful, and I really thank you for your time today. All right, so actually, I think we have 3 minutes before we play. And so does anyone have any additional follow-up questions for me that would be helpful for the session? Okay, so one question. Sure. Yes. Of course. So if you want to email me it's D like David, and then Johnson, JOHNSON, and that's at. So I'm gonna spell it out. Awan, which is A as in apple, W as in woman, H as in health, O as in obstetrics, N as in neonatal, and N as in nurses. .org. So, because that's where I work. It's an organization that focuses on nurses that specifically support women and newborns, women while they're pregnant, while they're actually in labor and delivery, and then newborns. It's a specific specialization that some nurses have that kind of differentiates them from other nurses. All right.
I just want to say one thing.
Yes.
Having gone to diversity, who's right next door,
Yes.
and then coming here, and also thinking about what you talked about this morning, there's so much application of everything you're saying in terms of increasing diversity in all of our chapters. And I just want you to know that. I mean, it's a real, and actually some of the people who are leading the diversity discussion wanted to be here to hear what you have to say.
Sure.
Because everybody's reaching, and we're in the LA chapter, and we really value and have done a lot of work in reaching out. But I wish I had known a lot more of these kinds of things when we first started doing
Sure.
it. So I think it's really helpful. And also, one of the biggest things that we were talking about is this issue of agencies versus private practice, and that there's a lot more diversity of clinicians and agencies who can't always come to our daytime meetings versus private practice practitioners. So there's a lot of, and so if we can have different meetings, we're working on it in a way to have more events that are more accessible. But it's very interesting because they're so combined.
They are, and I think diversity and inclusion is something that's just huge across the board for organizations because it also impacts when you look at not just who are the members within a profession, but then who are the people that are leading, like in some cases, like the large agencies.
Right.
Like it then suddenly, like there's certain things that as you do, the diversity starts to fall out of the way. And so that's why, that question that I asked about, as you look around the room and you see who's not there, and then trying to think about, is this because we're scheduling at a specific time? Is it the topic that we're related to? These are, they're really meaty discussions to have to be in. But I think the way that you guys that you're thinking about this, talking about this, approaching this, that there have been 3 instances where diversity and inclusion has been kind of woven in to the things that, that speaks volumes about the values of your organization. And so now you guys as leaders, you just have to figure out what are you going to do with it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you guys. Thank you.